Hey, it's Saturday night. Welcome to the First Layer live stream. This is Ask for Help, where we get to get a chance to talk with you guys and answer your questions about 3D printing. That guy over there, that's my good friend Brian Baker, who is
How's it going, Richard?
Our tech wizard. I like to call him our tech wizard.
That works.
Yeah. We got some things up and running tonight. In case we have somebody who does a funny. There we go.
That's just my existence.
Well, it's better than this one.
Well, that's pretty,
Yeah,
that's
better
pretty
than that one.
fantastic.
Good evening to everybody in our chat room tonight. You guys have been just like scrolling through, so I can't get everybody's name. So I'm just going to say a general hello. If you're new here, put new in the comments so we know that you're new. Or new in the chat, so we know that you're new here. And if you are new, welcome. And again, welcome to all of our friends from around the world. Now, tonight,
I just wanted to put a throw out there to Joe M, who says 106 degrees Fahrenheit in Australia today. Buddy, I envy you just a little bit. It warmed up to a balmy 40 here this week. So, as you can tell, t-shirt weather, huzzah.
There you go. You can do it. New Advanced Skills is new. Well, welcome to our live stream. We do appreciate you coming by tonight. We're here for the next hour. We're going to answer your questions live. We've got some emails that came in, and we wanted to let you know that Super Chat is turned on, as always. And we're moving forward. You can see that we've got a little different look. Love
and
this
thank
new
you for
start.
the feedback. Sorry, Pierre? I can't read the name backwards on my screen. Is that Pierre?
That's Pierre.
Okay, perfect. I got to work on my teleprompter flip around, so all of my visuals are backwards. I'm learning how to read backwards unintentionally. So
there you go. All right, so we had a question come in earlier, and it went into our queue, and my wife is going to pull that up right now. We'll answer that first question, and as soon as I see it, there we go. Actually, I can't see anything on that screen, so
that's backwards to me. Okay, good.
There we go.
Okay, I can't read backwards. Yeah,
this is from Kyle Watson. He says, I want to make a model bigger by about 175%. I'd like to know if I should increase the infill. It is at 20% infill now. Here's my answer to that pretty quickly and easily. You don't have to increase the infill because then you start wasting plastic. 20% is going to be 20% regardless of how big you make it. Now, depending on what type of infill you're using, that can be your hit or miss. Now, I always like to use the new one in Cura, which is called...
Gyroid?
Gyroid, that's the one.
Yep. Gyroid.
Thank you, Brian.
Look at me being on the ball, yeah.
Gyroid is the one that I use quite often. And, it's the one that fills in the most. I don't get any pillowing on top or anything like that. But if you are going to increase the size, make sure that you increase your top and bottom layers. That's important to get a nice smooth transition between the sidewalls and your upper layers, especially if you're going on a curve, okay?
Now just remember with gyroid, because it does have a lot of directional changes, especially on Cartesian machines where you have lower accelerations, it will take longer to print. But the positive side of that is that the curves actually create more structural integrity, so you may actually be able to drop that infill even more if you're just looking for side-to-side pressure. I use gyroid, pretty much gyroid and triangle is the only ones I go through.
There, we got a couple of new people in here tonight. Holy Christmas.
Well, maybe we should explain what this show actually is then.
Yes, maybe we should.
We're just a couple of guys rambling and saying, welcome to our new show. No.
Welcome to our show, yeah. I will tell you what this show is. This show is designed to help you, the 3D printing enthusiast, whether you're just starting out or you're up to that intermediate level. We try not to go over the intermediate level and get into the expert because most of our clientele are pretty new to the hobby. We do have some people in our chat room tonight that are number one, and they've been around for quite a while, as long as we've been doing it anyway, and they have just about as much knowledge as we do, and they may have more knowledge on other topics than we can cover here on the show.
We are a community. We are just merely some broadcasters, so we do have knowledge, but we are not self-proclaimed experts.
That's
Even though
true.
some of you do call us experts. There's always something new to learn. What can I say?
There is. And in this hobby, there is amazing things to learn each and every week. So
Absolutely.
let's get a nice big picture of our fat heads in there.
Hang on. I gotta lean the right way.
There you go.
I gotta adjust my camera positions. There we go.
So you can see in the background that there's not a lot going on back there now, and there's a bunch of stuff over on my desk. I've been using some new tools this week to get better B-roll for you guys when we put out brand new episodes. So I'm really having fun playing with those. So it's been an adventure for sure. Now let's jump right back into questions here. Our first question tonight, an email, comes from Luke Murray, and I do have Luke's. There we go. This is a picture that Luke sent to us, and the email says, "I'm receiving some layer inconsistencies on my CR-10S. Do you know what may be the problem and solution to this issue?" Now, as we look at this photo, we can see that I didn't crop Brian's video properly, but that's okay. We'll live with it for tonight. So
wait. I can reach over into it. Okay.
You can almost reach over to it, yeah. So you can see here that he's got some layer inconsistencies going on around what looks like to be screw holes, and there's a little bit of warping happening on the bottom. I'm not sure exactly what material he's using here. I'd really like to know what the material is.
Judging by that bridging and that little bit of sagging, it really does look like PLA, at least from the tiny screenshot I'm comparing it to from a distance.
Yeah.
But I don't know, and you can cut me out if I'm wrong on this, but that sure looks to me, you're going to notice that it actually is getting quite thin around edges where you have more directional changes. So when you have a hole, it has to come out of that hole, print along the line, and go back out. And what it looks like is, number one, there may be some actual play in your motion, whether that's a result of too high acceleration or your belts are a little loose. And then the other thing, too, is just coming to the edges with that, you might be printing a little fast as well for that nozzle, where you're not getting the filament moving at the correct rate. Marlin has to try and guess when a line will finish and when at the same time the extrusion will end. And that's why we have technologies like linear advance and coasting and things to try and overcome the unpredictable flow rates. But what we're seeing here is that it's stopping and going, and the nozzle can't, at least the current configuration, it can't keep up with those changes. So your cubes will look great, but a good example is try printing a circular object, and you're going to see a lot more of this artifacting because there's a lot of directional changes. So I'm of the opinion to slow it down a little bit, check your belts, and make sure your acceleration's not set too high. What do you think, Richard?
That would actually be exactly what I would say too. He says he's using, in the chat I can see he says he's using black PLA from Filament PM. I'm not sure what Filament PM is, but I would say here what's happening is slow it down a little bit. Check your temperature. If you didn't do a temperature tower like this one here, if you didn't do one of those before you started printing, this is going to give you a lot of visual clues as to what might be happening. So I would say your heat is probably just a tad too low, because when we get into those changes around the screw holes there, and like Brian said, you are doing directional changes. It looks like what's happening is it's pulled itself in a little bit in certain areas, or it's a little soft, and you've also got that banding line around it. So at the end of the day, I would say start with this. Do one of these for every new roll of filament that you get. If you're unsure how to do that, we do have a video on how to do a temperature tower on our YouTube channel, on this channel that you're on this evening. And then I would say to probably up the heat just a little bit and drop that speed just a little bit. I think that could clean things up for them. I think now, you hit it right on the head there, Brian.
Yeah, now Luke actually provides some additional information, and this actually changes my opinion just a little bit. So Filament PM is just a company from overseas. Okay. It looks like they're pretty reputable, but we don't have it here in North America, so I can't speak for it. But he's saying speed was 50 millimeters per second, acceleration and jerk were very low. Now, I'm curious what value you used for jerk, because jerk in itself, without getting into the boring mathematics of it, jerk attempts to reduce the vibration on a corner by rounding off the movement to the next one. And this is why people don't like jerk and were really pushing for junction deviation. It was how it did the calculation. But simply put, the lower your jerk value is, the more it attempts to slow down on corners by rounding the movement into the next move. And if your jerk is below, let's say, 5 millimeters per second, you can actually start seeing a noticeable artifact of rounding on edges, which is actually what we're seeing in this photo. I don't think, Richard, you can zoom in on it, but if you take a look at one, if you take a look at one of the rounded corners, you're going to notice that it's thinner every time there is a bunch of movements, namely on the left-hand hole. And you can actually see, thanks to the contrast of the background, you can actually kind of see like a little inlet divot on that corner, and that's because it has to do a much more rapid change in direction due to its quick shift of move forward, draw across, and then start drawing backwards. So your jerk, he's saying jerk was at 8.
Yeah.
Luke, I would actually, believe it or not, I would try at 12 and see if the salmon skinning becomes an issue, if you have layer shifting. It does vary printer to printer, but even jerk at 8, if your acceleration is far too low, will cause an issue. Did he mention which printer he used?
Yeah, it was the CR-10S. On my CR-10S, my jerk is always set to 8, and my speed is anywhere between 40 and 45, and I get beautiful prints off of it every time. I would
just check
also
your slicer
your belts.
and see if I was going to say check the belts. Well. Yeah. And the acceleration, make sure it's still set at the 500 by default.
Yeah.
From the firmware. But yes, this has been an issue I have seen before, specifically with jerk kind of overcompensating on those movements.
You bet.
And again, you can bump up the speed. Just make sure that your acceleration handles it. So the simple answer with acceleration is you set it to the point that you don't have layer shifting and you don't have weird banding as a result of overshooting the points, but not too low that the machine can't even reach the 40 mil or 50 mil.
Dominic Versetto. Did you see that one?
No.
I just saw this pop up from Rick Landon. Does the jerk have anything to do with filament retraction?
Okay.
No. There is a factor built in for jerk for extrusion, and I've never changed it past 5 mil. The real direction change doesn't really impact it in my experimentation, shall I say? Oh, okay. And you're adopting it to an SKR 1.4 turbo. Linear advance will be coming. Yeah. Okay. So
we'll cross that bridge when we get.
We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But yeah, the turbo is a great board. I just have a feeling you might have a few more hiccups before you get to enabling linear advance.
All right. Dominic Versetto, is chainmail dimensionally inaccurate by its nature? If you're 3D printing it, more than likely, yes. Now, I have noticed on something that should be perfectly round on a printer that if you look at the numbers that your slicer is saying your X and your Y dimensions are, they usually don't match. They're usually out by just a little bit on one of those two axes. And at the end of the day, what I've done to make round circles round is I've gone in and changed them so that they're exactly what they should be. So if I know a part needs to be 150 millimeters in circumference or dimensionally across, I will know that if one of those X or Y axes is off, I will make sure that it's 150 across the board.
And I can say I've never had to adjust my steps per millimeter on X or Y.
No.
If there was an issue, it was a result of the belt either being too loose or being so tight that it was jumping on itself. So for most FDM printers, unless you're doing a different steps per millimeter, it should be about 80. 80 is what I think they mathematically calculated for it. And that's what I've used on all my machines and never had a dimensional inaccuracy.
Mika, have you got a list of tools for cleaning prints? No, I don't, but I am going to be putting one together for our new show, The Last Layer. That is a show where we're going to show you how to finish your 3D prints, and I will have all the tools that I use And I'll also have links to all of those in our Amazon store for you. So,
But to begin with, one of the best tools you're going to have need, you already
More
have.
like I
Yes.
use.
Blue snippers.
yep, these things right here.
So that's your sneak peek. Honestly, those things, by definition, they're called side cutters in the industry, and the difference is if you take a look close up at side cutters. I don't have any other pairs here to compare against.
Here,
but
let me go.
if
Let
you
me go
buy,
to my top down.
Yeah, if you compare a regular set of side cutters or a pair of like wire cutters to side cutters, you're gonna know something major, and that's that on a side cutter, the two blades actually come and touch each other on the end and are flat underneath, and they're meant to be a side cutter because they create a clean cut on there. If you try to use anything like electrical cutters or anything like that, you're going to enough. Oh yeah, there you go. Richard's got
There
it.
we
So
go.
if you take a look at the pliers on the left, you see that little chamfer right on the left left blade there. So that one actually is a little closer to the side cutters, but it still doesn't give you as clean of a cut as side cutters. And these side cutters can be super cheap to buy. Super cheap to buy. But yeah, stay tuned for that video on the details of cleaning up prints. It's actually going to be quite a verbose video on that. What Richard's showing here, our other main big tool, is a deburring tool. I had to think about that for a moment.
Yeah, it's a deburring tool.
Now this, I won't lie, I don't use them too often, but I do use them for removing brims and sharpening up edges of my prints. And all these tools are like $10, give or take,
Cheap.
on Amazon on a good day. And I think the last one I bought was 26 Canadian, but it came with 12 additional blades. So that thing's going to outlast me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I've got one more tool here.
Okay,
Or
I guess
at
we're
least
doing the
should.
full tool feature here tonight.
Here's another
the
tool I
Olfa
use.
knife. Yeah.
I use
Now
one
you can
of
buy
those.
brand. I won't lie to you guys. I did recently buy this one, which is the pro grade one, and it's a life changer.
Always upstaging me, Brian.
I mean, well, you know, I was at Home Hardware looking for insulation tape. I think these were like
Hey,
16
Brian's
bucks.
picture's not on there.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm looking at my little preview in the corner. That's why. I didn't realize I was full screen here. Yeah, I got the Pro Olfa model. At the end of the day, it does help. A better quality blade's going to last longer. Greg
is.
R, don't forget calipers. Well, that's right here. That's the tool that is great for development. Is it great for cleaning? No, it's useless.
Yeah, it's useless. Dominic's saying he's having trouble with something square. So what I would do, Dominic, is I would go into my X and Y settings where you would adjust the scale, and you'll see exactly what those measurements are, and if they're off, that's why. So I would just go and change those to suit what you need it to be.
Now, dimensional accuracy, it gets a little more complex than that. That's why I'm saying there's no... The likelihood of your X and Y steps per millimeter being off is very unlikely. What you want to look into, and what a lot of people are recommending now, is you want to dial in your extrusion multiplier so that your walls are the same thickness all the way around. So your slicer presumes that, let's say this pen here, the tip of the nozzle is dead center of your extrusion amount. And so they figure, hey, if it's moving along the line at 0.2, the width of that filament is going to be 0.4, or if you simplify 3D defaults to 20% more, which is I think 0.48. And based off that, it determines how to fit in your dimensions. So what you want to do, is just print out a cube. I think it's under Michael from Teaching Tech's guide, a way to print a hollow cube and measure with your set of calipers here. Good old set of calipers. Measure the width of that wall and adjust your slicer to say, hey, when my nozzle's printing lines at 0.2, it's actually this wide. And that will adjust it and dial it into, I don't know, 0.01 millimeters or something. Basically
like that.
rounding tolerances.
Trevor Rickard asks, what is the ideal speed for direct drive? I have a CR-10S with SKR 1.3 TMC 2130s. Well, direct drive cannot move as fast as a Bowden setup. So Theoretically, it can't. So if you're printing up at 60 millimeters per second, you're going to want to drop that down to right around that 40-45 again. I use 40-45 for everything, just because it does give me the best prints. Now, you've got to remember, with all that weight on there, you've got more inertia going back and forth. So you're going to want to bring that down. You're also going to want to stop down that jerk setting to around 8 or 5, so that it comes more to a solid stop, as opposed to ramping down and then coming to a stop, where it's going to give you, because of that inertia, it's going to keep going. So
here's an example, actually, because this jumps right back into our question about jerk and acceleration. So let's take, for an example, you're on a highway, and eventually you need to make a left turn, and you see that left turn approaching. Now, the philosophy of when you brake for that turn is going to depend on your payload, on how heavy you are. A sedan can brake much quicker than a semi. Now, you can try and cheat things, and that's what jerk really is, by saying, hey, instead of going and rolling right up to that stop sign and then making a left, I'm just going to kind of ease into it and like California stop and glide through on a round, which, you know, if you set it too high, you're going to end up in the ditch. But if you time it just right, you can actually slow down less because you're still going to be moving as you go around that corner. Now, when it comes to adding a direct drive extruder, you've added this extra weight. So now let's say your SUV is towing a trailer. So what does that mean? You can go slower and have that same braking distance, or you can increase the braking distance and drive faster. And that's what acceleration is. So if we say 500, let's say if you drop it down to a 100, it means you're going to have to brake further back when approaching that change. But you can go way faster leading up to that braking starting point. And that's the balance of acceleration and speed, basically, is you can set in your slicer 300, 400 millimeters per second if you want. But if you set your acceleration where it needs to be, say 150 mils per second, you're only ever going to probably reach maybe 60 at your maximum curve. And the more curves and changes you have in your model, the slower it's going to print. So basically, you know, you're tinkering around with things. 500, which is in the Creality firmware, is the maximum you want to go before they know things go bad. So if you want to go faster and you're finding you can't do it, you can drop that acceleration. But the more turns you have, it may actually print slower at the end of the day.
Okay.
sorry about that.
That's just my boring details there. You know,
Okay.
it's acceleration and jerk are very important settings to understand because it seems more and more slicers are trying to set it through firmware or through their G code rather than relying on the factory defaults. And there's a reason the companies set those factory defaults. They've spent the time to say this is where we know it's going to reliably work.
All right, so Scarecrow has questions here. He says, I have an Ender 3 Pro. I'd like to get an Ender CR-10 version 2. Well, that's not the Ender, that's the CR version. For my second printer, is that a good one or do you recommend a better one? I actually recommend the V2, the CR-10 V2. I think it's a great machine. It does really well. It's easy to set up, much like your Ender 3 Pro. It's got a few advantages over the older models. It's easier to add BL Touch to, or if you bought it with a BL Touch, you can actually buy them now with the BL Touch already pre-installed. They have a better board, and they have a silent board, so it's a 32-bit board that's in those things, I believe, with 2208 stepper drivers. So it's quieter, it's a little bit more robust, so I think you're getting a good printer there.
Yeah, it's a great machine. I honestly, I wish I had an Ender 5 Plus in my hands so I could tell you guys, because it's got a similar build size to the CR-10 V2. I've really wanted to play with it, but I haven't really had any time to play with one to be able to tell you, hey, maybe consider that in lieu of the CR-10, because I am really starting to like these Cartesian cube printers. You know, I prefer Core XY, but ignoring that, just a Cartesian one, whenever you get these cube printers where all the inertia is just on the hot end and not moving the bed back and forth, you can get higher speeds, you can get less vibration, and they actually take up less room because you don't have to have that extra room for your bed to move back and forth. But yeah, the CR-10 was my second printer, first one being like a monoprice, and I'm still running it behind me here today. They are great machines.
Robert Coble has a question in email he was sent to us this week. on a G-Tech A10M. He says, "Hi guys, I'm a total noob at this 3D printing." We were all there, Robert. Don't worry about it. "I have a G-Tech A10M. My question is, are the Ender 3 and this printer the same thing? What parts are compatible? Better hot end or extruder suggestions, and how to successfully get the bed leveled and keep it there. Thank you, Robert." Robert, all Cartesian printers are inherently the same based on their technology. However, the parts they use can vary from printer to printer.
Yes.
Everything from the motors right through to the type of hot end that they're using. They could be using a Mark 8, they could be using a Mark 10, they could be using something that is strictly G-Tech. I think G-Tech usually uses a Mark 10 if I'm not mistaken.
It's well, the one that they feature online, at least on all 3DP, is a dual nozzle.
Right.
So, I mean, if you look at the machine, fundamentally out of core design, it is the same. It's the same machine as an Ender, basically, with a couple vendor modifications, such as the LCD, just the frame underneath. But otherwise, we would call this an Ender clone because Creality was kind of the first company to come out with the budget frame like this. We could go back and talk about i3 Megas and all that, but they all seem to be following the same philosophy of the same wheels and all that. Most of the parts on this don't look to be interchangeable with the Creality models, namely on the hot end. But when it comes to like your motors, your stepper motors, the GT2 cable, it is all the same. Now, I haven't worked with the A10M, but I'm going to tell you guys right now, most of these machines, the only places they'll really fail is in that hot end assembly. That's the place where if they get cheap, you're going to notice it. Now on this one, you'll see you have a Bowden setup, so the clogging at that stage is unlikely. I don't know much about their extruder assembly, if they got a photo of it down here. But even if we look at this, it is pretty much an Ender 3 clone. Now the hot end, we've said it many times before, we don't like these mixing nozzles because it's just too temperamental. Ignoring the fact that some filaments may dye the other path and you're never actually going to get the true colors, to the extraction amounts, to the purge amounts. It just, the lists are enormous. However, almost every company now has created some kind of either retrofit kit in to put an E3D V6 hot end on these or a micro Swiss. So if we take a look at that plate in this photo, which again isn't very clear, that sure looks like a copy of the Creality plate. In which case, you may actually be able to buy the micro Swiss hot end and put it in there. But don't take my word for it. I would look to see if someone else has done it first.
These hot ends that are in these machines, just so you know, the hot end that's in this is very similar to the Cyclops from E3D. Now, they're very poorly built hot end, in all honesty, because of the nature of how they have to mix the two plastics. And they clog very easily, and when they clog, there's no easy way to unclog them. Literally, you're either tossing them or you're doing a lot of messing around and remachining and cleaning to get it all cleaned out. You could be lucky. Morgan Pierce says, "Richard has worked on one." Yes, I have, and I've worked on Morgan's actually. But at the end of the day, these mixing nozzles I'm not a huge fan of, and that leads into this next question here from Joe M. He says, "Are all metal hot ends any good?" Depending on what you buy. If you buy cheap Chinese $7, $8, $15 hot ends, no, they're not going to be any good. If you buy something like this, I know I've got one on my desk because there it is. If you buy something like this, technically, that's an all-metal hot end. Let me go to the overhead. Technically, this is an all-metal hot end. So, we'll just cut to that. There we go. This one here, let me just clear the question. Technically, it's all metal. Okay, if we look at it, it's an all-metal hot end. However, where this becomes a difference is in the heat break, which is located, and I'll just grab a pencil here so I can show you guys. How about one with a tip on it? I know I've got one. There we go. So if we look at the heat break, which is right here, this heat break is designed to have the Bowden tube travel all the way down to this point here where the heat break meets the actual nozzle threads. So where those two meet, that's where the Bowden tube comes down to. So this makes this one a non-all metal hot end, while technically still being an all metal hot end. Now this is a buzzword, really. All metal hot ends are a buzzword these days. So when you're looking for a good all metal hot end, you don't want any Teflon tube going down through that heat break. You want it to stop where the heat break starts, which is right about in here, okay? And then this should all be machined material that will travel all the way down through the heated block and down to the nozzle. Now the nozzle, on the other hand, brass can still work, but I would probably go to a stainless steel nozzle just to get it to heat better, because all of this is going to be heating at different rates. Because remember, these blocks are still aluminum, these heat fins are still aluminum, but the throat and the actual nozzle itself should be stainless steel or tungsten or something along that line.
Yeah, I think a bunch of them come in titanium now, too.
Yes, you can get titanium ones as well.
I'm just going to jump to Joe's other question here, because that kind of leads into it. Why do some hot ends have Captain tape wrapped around them? Are they the cheap ones? No, they're not, but it's a hacky way of keeping them insulated.
Yep.
You can get basically the same result with a silicone sock these days, but when the earlier printers came out, the tape was the cheapest way to manufacture it. You can remove the tape, but it's really going to be a net negative if you remove it. But we've all had filament get jammed in there and all that. Once it's all ruined, you can still keep using your hot end. Just be aware you might have to bump it up a couple degrees to get the same performance, because the heat will dissipate quicker off that block.
Carl is asking, evening gents, he says, thoughts on all silicone bushing replacements for bed springs, thanks. Well, I think they work. However, if you don't have auto bed leveling, it doesn't serve you any purpose to replace your bed springs. You're still going to need those bed springs to level out that bed. If you've got an an auto bed leveling system like a BL Touch, then it can come in handy. Now just be aware that in that back left corner, the top left corner, you're going to find that because there's usually some sort of strain relief in there, your silicone or whatever material that you're using, your silicone is not going to be nearly as strong or as long to make sure that that bed is dead flat. So
I'm just curious, why would you want to go with silicone when at that point you might as well go with metal spacers?
Yeah,
silicone has a compression ratio that could actually change your bed leveling on all movements, whereas the all metal ones are just straight up clamping to the bed. I'll be honest, I run metal inserts on all my printers with BL Touches on them. And the good thing is it reveals issues with your machine. You know, if your bed is improperly leveled, in the case of mine, I actually was getting some warping on my bed. So I was able to resolve that I basically would have tried to fix by adjusting the springs previously. It does offer quite a bit of rigidity. And the only downside is when you have it clamped right down, because it's solid, you may notice more vibrational changes with direction changes, especially on the bed side. So if you have that clamped tight right down, basically when you have springs, it actually can wiggle a little bit at the end of the movement to kind of debounce it. And that will be much more apparent now when you have the solid mounts. But again, if you have a BL Touch and your bed is fairly level, then the solid mounts are definitely the way to go.
3D print newbie Milan asks, does Microswiss make the best all metal hot end? Or are other companies that make making hot ends that can run the same comparison with it? I will tell you this, the two best companies to choose are E3D or Microswiss. I
Yes.
am a Micro Swiss fan. Micro Swiss doesn't pay me to say this. They've never paid me to talk about their products. I've used their products. I really like their products because they work. I have never, in the length of time that I've had 3D printers, ever had a problem with a Micro Swiss hot end. Usually the problems that I have are with the filament going through it. And that's not to say that the hot end is causing the problem. It's actually the filament, either it being a lower grade or something else has gone wrong. It's got too much moisture in it or whatever. It's usually the fault of the filament, not the fault of the hot end. So at the end of the day, would I recommend Micro Swiss? Absolutely. I think they are one of the top in the industry. And I also think that E3D is the other top one in the industry, and I think those are the ones to go with.
Now, just to talk briefly about like Micro Swiss, basically the reason we really push them so hard is because the primary viewing audience that we have owns Creality machines.
Yep.
And all the Enders and CR10s have up until now basically used the exact same hot end style. When it comes to any kind of V6, as we call it, really there's no options better than the E3D V6. The only kind of flag to that rule, I would say, is I've been really enjoying the Triangle Labs Dragon hot end, which goes for about $100 Canadian. But that there's a few reasons I went that route, and basically it comes down to they use the E3D style, but they can obtain volcano flow rates on a hot end of the same size as the regular V6. But again, that's $100. So if you're not going that route for a V6 hot end, the E3D is great. The light V6, which is not an all metal, is also a great hot end if you're just purely using PLA.
High Tech Redneck says, hey, anyone use one of those food printers? I saw an extruder that prints coca, or cocoa. I would imagine cocoa.
Yeah, the chocolate printers. There was a guy in Calgary who was trying to sell those nonstop.
They came and they went, and I will be, first and foremost, I got to do this.
Super chat.
Thank you, Jugger D, for the super
Wow.
chat. We do really appreciate that.
$50. Thank you so much.
We do really
That's
appreciate
very
that.
generous. We really
Comes in
appreciate
very
that.
handy.
Be sure to ask a question when you donate that much, because otherwise it's like, what else can we say to you? You know, we're not worthy. We're not worthy.
And we appreciate everybody that uses our super chat. It does come in very handy for us to do what we do. Now, getting back to the food, I have seen a food 3D printer. There's one here in Calgary, actually. And does it work really well? No, not really. Hygienically, do you have to continually clean it so you don't get mold and other stuff in it? Yes. So it's not something yet that's ready for the market. I know that Naomi Wu did one not too long ago, and she showed one off where they were making her, I think, sushi rolls and soup and things like that. And she really enjoyed it and thought it was great. And I think, okay, great, awesome.
It's a neat concept, and I actually have a linear actuator here to show you guys. This is how those machines work, and you can get these on AliExpress for fairly cheap. But it's just basically a guide on a rod similar to your X gantry, and you'll attach a syringe to the end of this. And what you have to figure out is one press here will equate to how much material out the end. And if you can get one that's accurate enough, you can actually make your own basically with any kind of compound that can be pushed through a syringe. And if we look at the large industrial concrete printers, it's the same sort of thing. It's using pneumatics to push it through a line to a specific location, because when in the case of chocolate, especially when it becomes that soft, you can't simply just feed it through as a rod. It's going to liquefy, and its weight is going to basically cause it to drip out of the hot end. So you need something to regulate it, and the only way is forcing it really with these syringes. So if you want to make your own food printer, now I'm not telling you to do this because, food regulations and all that, but go online, find a little like 12-volt actuator on AliExpress, wire it back to your printer or to the extruder, figure out your ratios, attach a syringe, and then just make sure your offsets are right, and it'll just go around and keep extruding until you're out of chocolate.
Make fruit roll-ups. 3D
Hey,
Print
that sounds
Newbie
really good
Milan
right now.
says, thank you very much. I just purchased 2 more Micro Swiss hot ends for the 2 new Ender 3s that I just got in. So now I can go ahead and wipe the sweat off my forehead. Well, you've done yourself a great service by going with that particular one. So
I'm still soloing here, buddy, so I'm just going to keep dancing.
yeah, you can keep dancing. Can you still hear the music?
Yeah, there we go. No, I can't. But my frame rate dropped during that dance, so
Yeah,
I'll
it
take the
did.
hint.
Yeah. Stop dancing.
Yeah, the Micro Swiss is great for the Ender 3s. Just be sure, again, to take your time in assembling it properly, especially with the throat and the torquing. We've done a couple of videos on that. If you start noticing clogs after the installation, the product's not defective. Chances are it just needs to be torqued up a little bit. So
You bet.
let us know your experience. Questions at the first layer is where we send these emails for the questions. But if you have some cool feedback and you want to share something, you can do it on our Facebook group or just send us an email and maybe we'll talk about it next week.
Let's put up that little call to action. There we go. Your audio keeps going off again. I got to fix that. So if you have questions, you can always send them to questions@thefirstlayer.com. And it is where you can send all your questions throughout the week. We get them in our email. If you send them to any other email, chances are I'm not going to see them because they usually go into my spam folder if they come into my personal or Brian's personal or my wife's personal. So you want to make sure that you're sending your questions to questions@thefirstlayer.com. So, hi, I'm Sachin. Hi, Sachin. Just have a question about filament. I'm new to 3D printing. I just picked up a silk gold filament, and it seems so inconsistent in printing. Could it just be bad filament? That is a possibility. However, like I said earlier in the show, you want to make yourself a temperature tower. And I have a full guide on how to do this using Cura, and any version of Cura in the last year you'll be able to use to do it because it's still all in the same place. Make yourself a temperature tower for that filament. It's going to tell you 3 things. 1, where you're getting your best layer adhesion. 2, where you're getting your best bridging. And 3, how sharp your corners are going to be at that particular temperature. Don't use this one. There is a link to the one that we use in our video that we have over on our YouTube channel that you're on right now, and it will definitely help you. And if there is a problem, that's where you're gonna find out if there's a problem in that material. So it starts at 200.
It's the cheapest way to make sure it works good.
Yeah,
rather than being
it
hundreds of
starts
hours
at
in,
240
right?
and it ends at 190, I believe. And
I believe that's the lowest, yeah.
Yeah, it starts at 240 and goes down to 190. So try that out. If you're still having problems, hit us up next week or send me some pictures to questions@thefirstlayer.com. We'll put them up next week. And now that we can,
Yay!
we'll put them up next week and we'll get a closer look and everybody can have a look at it. All right, one more question here in our emails this week. Pierre Blanchard got in real late. Pierre, I know you're out there. I know you're in the chat.
All right, we're
tonight,
winging this, Pierre.
He says,
We're winging this.
cooling the parts. Is it better to have the fan going from one side to the nozzle or from 2 opposite sides of the nozzle? Thank you very much and see you this evening. Pierre, I'm going to tell you, the way that heat or fan shrouds are designed, they're designed for that particular printer, okay? And does it need to go all the way around? No. Can you make it go all the way around? Yes. Don't add a secondary fan because what you're going to be doing is blowing too much air onto that hot end, and it's going to cause problems with your prints later on down the road.
Super chat.
Yeah. Go ahead. Thank you. It starts.
$4.99.
Can you recommend a TPU that doesn't shatter in 0 degrees Celsius temperatures? My generic TPU camera mount shattered today while flying drones. That seems a little like normally this stuff I would think is rated to -20. Honestly. It shouldn't be getting that brittle. What happened? Was that an impact? I'd like to know a little bit more about that because, yeah, TPU, like I've got a reel sitting here. I haven't actually temperature graded it, so I don't want to tell you that, hey, it's definitely works for that. It's also been a fairly warm winter here, but TPU is great for that flexibility. If you're finding that it's shattering, you may actually want to look into doing something like printing two parts in ABS and then filling the in between with silicone as a debounce, if you will, versus just going straight up TPU.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more. Yeah, crashed on the ground. Yeah, it's gonna be tricky. Now, the other thing you can do too is if it shattered, I'd like to know if it shattered along a layer line, because if it did, you're probably running your TPU at too low of a temperature while it's printing, so it fuses, but it doesn't align its particles, and that's when we start talking about annealing prints. You may want to consider annealing your TPU to give it that better strength. And if you're running at the highest that your printer is allowing, change the orientation of it. Look at your impact angle of where it crashed, and do things like print it at a 45-degree rotation so that your layer lines are not now on a strict axis.
So
TPU, Amazon
go ahead.
stuff, eh? Oh, he's saying it's Amazon stuff. Do you happen to know the sureness or the hardness rating on that? Because TPU is also a very large scale. So this is, I believe, 85, I think was what Spools was. It was 85,
Yeah, 85.
and then the TPU was 90. So basically, the higher the number, the softer it is. So you might actually want to go to TPE if you're looking at full rubber sort of sensation and compressibility. Now, TPE is much harder to print, but if that's your form at the end of the day, that might be worthwhile.
You can do it. New advanced skills. Hey guys, got to go back one there, hon. Sorry. She pushed it out before I could get a chance to. There we go. Hey guys, I'm having adhesion problems with my Ender 3 Pro. Could you give me some ideas on what to do? Relevel your bed, for one. Make sure that your bed is at a temperature of about 50 to 60 degrees, somewhere in there. But mostly I would say make sure that X gantry is level on both sides, okay? Because if that is not square to the rest of the printer, you're going to have adhesion problems. And I've seen it, I've done it, it's happened to me. The best way to do it, though, is to make sure that is done properly. And the best thing to use, I had some around here. I think I put them away. Wow. Did I actually put something away in my life?
It's clean. It's amazing.
Oh, here they are.
Oh,
Wow.
dang.
Look, I use these guys. And I stack them like that. These are just simple machinist blocks or 1, 2, 3 blocks. And I put I put a set on either side. They're not very expensive. You can even print yourself a couple of towers that are exactly the same height, and that would do the same thing. So that would be where I would check first. If you're still having adhesion problems, send me some pictures, and then I can advise you a little bit further on that.
And if it just suddenly changed on you, clean your bed. Just take the time, soap and water, a little bit of isopropyl afterwards. It'll make a huge difference.
Winston Fernandez. Well, I like that name, Fernandez. Hi, I have a roll of PETG that's a year old. I've been drying it in a Sunlu dryer for around 3 days. The walls are good, but the infill is quite bad. It keeps sticking to the nozzle Ender 3. PETG and an Ender 3 are not the best of friends, and I've never liked printing PETG unless you change that nozzle or that hot end. It's really, everything's happening in that hot end, to be perfectly honest with you. Because of these, where did I put it now? I had it right here. Because of the way that these are designed, and I talked about it a little bit earlier in the show, that PTFE liner comes all the way down to about that far when you shove that PTFE tube in there. And that is getting too hot. PETG needs to be printed, realistically, needs to be printed at right around 240, 245. And when you get up into that 235, 240, 245, 250 range, that PTFE liner, because it is so cheap, starts to break down. And then those little bits start coming out and it micro clogs your nozzle. So that's something I would be aware of.
Super chat.
Hey, Joseph Jolly,
Thanks so
thank
much,
you
Joseph
very
Jolly.
much for the
Thank you.
$9.99. We're giving everybody a little wave today. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much.
Rick Landon, if I put heat break in upside down, I have a jam. Well, yeah, you will. If you put a heat break in upside down.
I was telling Rick there, that's practically impossible to install that thing upside down because one end is noticeably longer than the other. Now,
Yes.
we've kind of discussed it before, and we'll have to do another video on a hot end breakdown. But you basically, the reason clogs happen is one of two reasons. It happens because heat creep, or it happens because there's a gap between the heat break and the nozzle inside the block. The former is always solved by proper cooling and making sure your fan's not built up, got a bunch of dust built up in there. It can do all sorts of nasty things. I had to spend a few hours unclogging one on the other day because the fan just decided to die partway through a print. And it was a Noctua. It wasn't a cheap fan, but they do go eventually. If you're receiving clogging like that, it's going to show up and you're going to have to unclog it. Now, if you're getting clogs in the print and then 10 minutes later it's working fine again, chances are it's a result of the heat break and nozzle not being lined up properly and torqued together inside the block. And if you have gaps in there or you have extra pressure, it just creates an alternate blockage point that it takes a certain flow rate to actually get to. And then when it clogs, you stop the printer, and while it's cooling down, it actually has time to release that excess pressure out the nozzle, and now magically your clog is gone. So proper hot end assembly is one of our key factors to having successful prints.
A few words on TPU and retraction. This is from Matt. Matt, retraction with TPU, you don't want to have too much and you don't want to have too little. TPU is notorious for stringing. And I think I've got mine set to 2 millimeters per...
It depends on your hot end, right? If you are printing on an all metal hot end, you can't go higher than 2 millimeters on those things, guys. Regardless of what material, don't set it any higher. But if you have a Bowden setup, the inverse is true, actually. The longer, the better. And the reason is because then it can pull it out, stretch it, and not cause it to swell up inside the block and plug your Bowden tube.
Correct.
So Creality, I think by default in Cura is 6.5 millimeters. That distance is pretty good. Now with TPU, L3D was saying that he was going at 50 millimeters per second.
Yeah.
My mileage varied on that because I found that was a little bit too quick, and the change in direction actually caused it to pop out of the extruder assembly on the other end where the Bowden connects. So you have to dial it in so that you don't have your filament go wonky, because it's like having a wet noodle in your hand, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You just got to balance it correctly for your machine. So Luke's numbers there, 4.8 at 50 millimeters per second for a Bowden setup, I think is actually a great starting point.
We've got TSWG, the rocket program. He says, thank you for your help. I'm back on track to making the Battle of Coruscant from Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. He says, I'm hanging the ships on my ceiling in my room. Excellent. Excellent. I'm glad that you're doing that. And I'm glad everything worked out for you.
Forced you to live into now? Because I know if I converted an entire room, I'd be... Actually, I don't know if she'd be mad or proud. Probably both.
There you go. Thesanska? I hope I said that right. Thesanska? Would you recommend a Micro Swiss direct extruder and hot end for Ender 3V2? Also, what about adding another Z-Rod? Z-Rods...
Former, yes. Latter, no.
It's not necessary to add another Z-Rod to an Ender 3 because they are such a small printer. And yes, I would go with a Micro Swiss. You can either go direct drive or hot end or extruder, it doesn't matter. Or Bowden, I'm sorry. Either one, it doesn't matter. We do really appreciate you asking that question because we, all the time, argue about that, Brian and I both.
Super chat.
Yes.
Hey, we got a super chat
Thank you.
from DeWitt, our good friend Tim. He says, no question, just wanted to thank you both for all the great advice you give to the community. Well, we do appreciate you being a member of our community as well, Tim.
Thanks, Tim, and I hope you're liking that new printer. Go check out Tim's channel. He's growing
Yes.
it now. Tim runs a business that, amongst many things, does some 3D printing, and he just got Naomi Wu's 3D mill printer that I haven't even had a chance to check it out. So yeah, check out his channel there.
I'm going to go break into his
talking-
house and bring it here for a little while.
Right, there you go. While we were talking about the Z rod here, I do have a big piece of extrusion here, and you might be wondering, what am I doing with this? This is because when I was working on my 10S Pro, 10S 10S5, I'm losing my mind here tonight. This is about 700 millimeters, this one. It's not a short length whatsoever. And although you can't really see it by hand doing it, if you notice, if I'm moving one arm up and down, notice how minimal the movement is on the other side. Now on a Creality printer, you've got it bolted here, and you got it bolted here. And on the Enders, there's only the motor on the one side. So when you have something this wide, you could potentially have that hot end lift up that much before this one starts to jerk along and catch up. Now when you got something this short, a change like that is much more noticeable, so chances are the two bolts over here are going to hold it in place and lift the whole thing up. The reason I mention this is because my Ender 3 downstairs has extrusion that's 600 millimeters long on the Z-axis, and I don't have a second Z-rod on that machine because it's not required. So simply put, the second Z-rod I would have recommended if your printer's build plate is wider than 300 millimeters, such as the CR-10S, and we saw that in the early iterations, where the 10 went from 1 rod to 2 rod, and anything bigger than 300 mil should definitely have 2 rods.
What temp do you use and how long for the salt and dryer? I don't have the salt and dryer, but I would say that depending on the material, if you're trying to dry out PLA, I think I would put it at around 50 degrees and leave it in there for about 3 to 4 hours. Brian?
Yeah, the Salton, again, each unit's different, so I do recommend going and buying a little temperature probe for $3 and throwing it inside the case. My experience with my Salton found that the air temperature inside that unit was about 5 degrees lower than my set point, and so if I set it to 60 degrees, I was getting a constant drying of 55. Now again, your mileage may vary. I don't want to tell you to start at 60, just in case if your particular model droops a little lower. But that is a good starting point, and I would say a couple hours is more than enough for PLA. We spoke about the Sunloo dryer earlier. My Sunloos here don't get any warmer than about 50 degrees, maybe 47, and I find it's actually not very effective at drying the filament versus something that can get up to that glass transition of 60.
BT Fisher says, should I buy the PEI smooth bed? I currently have the textured one. Is this more? What is
the smooth one better?
No, the smooth one is
my
not
opinion,
better.
No.
I like that
smooth
texture so that my material has a chance to grab it. It's very much the same way that glue stick works. It creates a texture on the glass. Again, any kind of texture is going to allow the material to flow into that texture and really grab your bed. If you're too close, you can damage it, but that's being said. Brian?
Yeah, you pretty much nailed it. When I used the smooth sides, I found I had the similar sort of adhesion issues with nozzle dragging and all that. It does become trickier. It all depends if you really want that mirror finish on the bottom. In my case, it's really not that important, so I prefer the textured side, especially when I'm printing as big items as I do. I really need that bed adhesion to be solid all the way through the print.
Ben wants to know, Christy wants to know from our point of view, how do I keep my husband from buying more 3D printers? Well, Christy...
You bankrupt him.
You take away the credit card. That's it. Don't allow him to buy online anymore.
You bring home a new man, Christy. Or, oh no, that would be in bad taste.
We can't incite divorce on this channel. We'll get demonetized.
No, for sure. It's buying through. I'll be honest with you. As a person who has about 12 printers in this house, I'm actually now getting to the point of realizing that I have too many. The fact is, many machines repeat the purpose of what they're for. So I always say, one machine, one purpose. If you want to have, I got a Wanhao here. I use it for ABS. Because of that, I don't have any other printers that do ABS. I've got a couple of Enders, and they're kind of my go-to machines. So when I'm tinkering with the other ones, I know they work. CR-10 S5, well, it's in pieces right now. I'm building a much bigger printer with it, but I have a big printer for doing big things. I have a resin printer for doing small things. If you have more than 4 printers, you better basically be doing mass manufacturing. And I can tell you right now, if you have more than 4 printers, you're not using them all, because I had 5 of them running the other day and nearly tripped my 1500 VA UPS. So unless they are distributed across breakers, which is unlikely, they're all in the same room.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that's what
We have way more than
you need
5.
4 printers.
Yeah, okay, this is going to be our last question for tonight because we're running out of time here. This one comes from 3D Print Newbie Milan. He says, if you're printing with the Ender 3, Ender 3 Pro, Ender 3 V2, if you add a direct drive, do you think with the weight that it's caused by the direct drive that you might need to add a second Z screw? No.
No,
I don't think so. No,
but you
not
are
at
going
all.
to have to. You're gonna have to drop your acceleration, because the weight on top of that motor stand is more than what those wheels were kind of spec'd for. So mine, I keep mine at about 400 acceleration. A Z screw, again, when you're dealing with Z screw, you're not dealing with. I mean, you are partially dealing with weight, but what you're really dealing with is the length of this rod and the tension of your wheels on the far side. There's nothing to pull it up apart from the tensile strength of this rod. And basic pulley lever physics says, the effort to tilt it here versus the effort to tilt it at the far end is way higher. And that's what we're dealing with here. Is this end has to lift this up over here and do that little amount. It has to force it quite a bit more. And without that balance, without having another screw to lift it up on this side, you're relying on that leveraging tension. And it's kind of like a diving board, right? It's going to flex more on the end before the board itself on the far end ends up moving up.
And that is all the time that we have for tonight. Yes, an hour went really, really quickly.
It really did today. Yeah, that was
did.
kind of nice.
I like that. I like the fact that you guys are on the ball with your questions, and it's awesome. We've got my wife
really
feeding
appreciate
questions to the screen, and she's doing a great job over there. She's gonna have her own mic now. Say hello, honey.
Hello, guys.
There she is. That's my lovely wife, Geraldine, and she's going to be with us in the background, pumping all of your questions to us on screen as we move forward. I want to thank Brian for joining me again tonight. And
Thanks again, Rich.
I want to show this one from, there we go. If you
I don't think I can do a 2-hour stream.
No,
I won't lie.
no.
I'd crash and burn.
my throat is already dry, so I'm feeling
Sipped
this.
away on this President's Choice peach ginger the whole time. So
There you go.
I'm sure that'll be an hour.
Thank you, everyone, for the super chats again this evening. We really do appreciate them. We do appreciate you guys joining us on your Saturday night and taking time out to help us with this
Ben.
channel and help us in our community. If you haven't yet become a member, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below and ding the little bell so you get notified. Also become a member of our Facebook group if you are on Facebook, because we do a lot of stuff over there as well. And we're doing more on Instagram, so you're going to see a lot more coming up. And I am starting to film a tour of what we have here now, so you guys will get to see that pretty soon as well. So until we see you guys...
We're pretty caught up, I think. Are we actually committing to the video this week?
We are committing to a video this week.
Good.
I only
Okay,
have
I'm so
one
sorry, everybody.
thing. I only have one thing to record for it, and then it's done. And this is this is kind of a quick little preview. I'm just going to put this up in the preview here. There we go. You can see this is the IDEX that you guys saw last week in the opening and this week in the opening. It is this is the one from WeDo. This is the X40. You guys are going to get the full breakdown, my full breakdown on this week. On Wednesday, and we're going to start recording a new episode this week as well for the following week. So until we see you guys next time, Brian, thank you very much for being a part of tonight, and thank all you guys for being a part of tonight. And until we see you next time, Brian,
remember that the first layer is always your foundation to a great print. We'll see you next time, guys.